The woman stood inside the marble lobby with rainwater dripping from the edges of her faded coat, clutching an old smartphone so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. Around her, everything looked impossibly expensive: gold-trimmed walls, polished floors, crystal lights, and people dressed in suits that probably cost more than her entire monthly income. She looked completely out of place. But she wasn't there to ask for money.
She wasn't there to beg.
She had only walked into the private bank because she wanted to see one number on a screen. When the millionaire behind her heard what she asked the banker to do, he laughed. It was a careless, arrogant laugh, the kind that comes from someone who has never had to count every dollar before buying groceries. But his laughter disappeared the moment the banker's face changed and the screen turned toward him. Before we begin, if you believe kindness can change someone's life, if you believe people deserve second chances no matter where they come from, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. You never know when a simple story might remind someone that their hardest day isn't the end of their story. Her name was Clara Bennett, a 42-year-old single mother living in a small rented apartment in Cleveland, Ohio. For most of her life, Clara had never wanted much. She didn't dream about mansions or luxury cars. Her greatest wish was simple: a safe home, enough food in the refrigerator, and the ability to make sure her 12-year-old son, Nathan, never had to wonder whether there would be dinner that night. Clara worked mornings cleaning offices and spent her evenings caring for elderly patients through a small home care agency. Some weeks she worked nearly 70 hours, yet she still counted every dollar before spending it. 3 months earlier, everything had gone wrong at once. Her landlord had increased the rent, her car had broken down, and the home care agency had reduced her hours. Then Nathan developed a serious infection that kept him home from school for several weeks. Clara used nearly every dollar she had saved to pay for medicine, transportation, and groceries. By the time summer arrived, her savings had fallen to almost nothing. There was one thing Clara had kept secret from everyone. Years earlier, before life became difficult, she had opened a small savings account at Hawthorne Private Bank. She had almost forgotten about it. It wasn't an ordinary savings account. It had been connected to an old financial trust established by her late grandfather, who had died when Clara was 23. At the time, the paperwork had seemed confusing and unimportant. Clara's grandfather had simply told her that one day, when she truly needed it, she should check the account. For years, she had ignored it. Now, with only a few dollars left in her checking account, she finally decided to find out what was there. That was why she entered Hawthorne Private Bank on that rainy Tuesday afternoon. Clara walked toward the customer service desk and quietly explained that she needed help accessing an old account. The banker, a young woman named Rebecca Collins, asked for identification and began searching the system. Clara waited nervously, hoping there might be enough money for Nathan's next prescription. She didn't notice the man standing several feet behind her. His name was Jonathan Mercer, one of the wealthiest investors in Ohio. At 48, Jonathan owned hotels, apartment buildings, technology companies, and investment firms. Newspapers often described him as brilliant, ruthless, and impossible to impress. He had built his fortune from almost nothing after his father died unexpectedly when Jonathan was 17. That morning, Jonathan had arrived at the bank to finalize a multi-million-dollar acquisition. He was impatient. He was tired. And when he overheard Clara quietly asking the banker if she could just see her balance, he couldn't stop himself from smiling. He looked at her worn shoes and faded coat, then at the enormous private bank around them. To him, the situation seemed almost absurd. Clara noticed his expression but said nothing. Rebecca suddenly became unusually quiet. She typed something into the computer, paused, then typed again. Clara's heart began beating faster. She asked if there was a problem. Rebecca didn't answer immediately. Instead, she asked Clara to confirm her grandfather's full name and the year the account had been opened. Clara provided the information. Then Rebecca stood up. She walked toward the back office. Jonathan glanced at his watch, annoyed by the delay. A few minutes later, Rebecca returned with a senior bank manager named Thomas Whitaker. The man's expression was completely different from before. He looked serious, almost shocked. Thomas approached Clara and politely asked her to come into a private office. Clara immediately became frightened. She wondered if she had somehow made a mistake. Maybe the account had been closed. Maybe there were fees. Maybe she owed the bank money. She followed them inside. Jonathan, still waiting for his own meeting, watched from a distance. Through the glass wall, he saw Clara sit down while Thomas placed a tablet in front of her. Clara looked at the screen. Her lips parted. She didn't move. Thomas said something quietly. Clara shook her head as if she couldn't believe him. Then tears began rolling down her cheeks. Jonathan became curious. He had seen people react to money before. He had watched executives celebrate million-dollar deals and investors panic over losses. But Clara wasn't smiling like someone who had just become rich. She looked devastated. Jonathan finally walked toward the office. He wasn't supposed to interfere, but curiosity got the better of him. When the door opened, he heard Thomas explaining that the account had been dormant for years, but had recently reached maturity under the terms of the original trust. Clara whispered that there must be a mistake. There wasn't. The balance on the screen was $2,480,000. Jonathan stopped walking. His earlier laughter suddenly felt like a punch to the stomach. The woman he had silently judged because of her old coat had nearly $2.5 million sitting in an account she had forgotten existed. But there was something even more shocking. Clara didn't look happy. She looked terrified. She asked Thomas whether she could withdraw enough money to pay Nathan's medical expenses and keep her apartment. Thomas assured her that she could. Then Clara asked a question that made Jonathan's expression change completely. She asked whether she could leave most of the money untouched. Thomas told her that she could. Clara wiped her tears and explained that her grandfather had always warned her that money could become dangerous if it made a person forget who they were. She said she didn't want to become someone who believed money made her better than other people. Jonathan stood silently near the door. For the first time in years, someone else's wealth made him feel poor. He thought about his own life. He had spent decades chasing bigger houses, larger companies, faster cars, and more impressive numbers on computer screens. Yet he couldn't remember the last time he had sat beside his mother simply because she needed company. He couldn't remember the last time he had helped someone without expecting something in return. Clara eventually noticed him standing there. She recognized him from business magazines and apologized for the earlier interruption. Jonathan shook his head. Then he told her that he was the man who had laughed. Clara looked surprised. He admitted that he had judged her without knowing anything about her life. He expected anger. Instead, Clara simply told him that everyone makes mistakes. Those 5 words stayed with Jonathan. Everyone makes mistakes. Jonathan left the bank that afternoon, but Clara's story followed him. The next morning, he canceled several meetings. Instead of going to his office, he visited the neighborhood where Clara lived. He discovered something he hadn't expected. Clara wasn't the only person struggling. The apartment building was filled with elderly residents, single parents, disabled workers, and families barely surviving from one paycheck to the next. The building's heating system frequently failed. Several children shared old textbooks. Some residents were behind on rent. Jonathan could have written a check and walked away. But he remembered Clara's fear. She didn't need someone to rescue her. She needed a chance to breathe. So Jonathan created something different. He purchased the building, not to remove the residents, but to stabilize it. He repaired the heating system, renovated the apartments, created a small community center, and established a scholarship program for children living there. When Clara found out, she was angry at first.
She didn't want charity.
Jonathan understood. He told her that the program wasn't charity. It was an investment in people. Clara eventually agreed to help manage the community center. Months passed. Nathan returned to school and began excelling in science. Clara reduced her working hours and started taking evening classes in social work. Jonathan continued visiting the building, but something inside him had changed. He stopped asking people what they could do for his companies. He started asking what he could do for them. One winter evening, Jonathan found Clara sitting in the community center, helping children with their homework. She looked happier than the day they had met. He asked her whether she regretted discovering the money. Clara smiled and said she didn't regret the money. She was grateful for what it allowed her to do. But she was even more grateful that, before seeing the balance, she had already learned how to survive without it. Jonathan understood then that wealth wasn't measured by what appeared on a bank screen. Sometimes wealth was having someone who believed in you. Sometimes it was having enough courage to begin again. Sometimes it was simply being kind when nobody was watching. A year after that rainy afternoon, Jonathan returned to the same bank. He stood in the lobby where he had once laughed at Clara. This time, he wasn't there for a business deal. He was there to open a foundation account. He named it the Bennett Hope Fund. Clara never asked him to do it. That was precisely why he did it. And whenever Jonathan was asked what had changed his life, he never talked about the millions he had earned. He talked about a woman in a faded coat who walked into a bank just wanting to see her balance. He talked about the moment he realized that the number on her screen wasn't the most valuable thing she possessed. It was her heart. And perhaps the greatest surprise of all was this. Clara had entered the bank thinking she needed money to save her family. Instead, she discovered that her grandfather's forgotten fortune could help change hundreds of lives. And Jonathan, the millionaire who thought he had everything, discovered that the person with the richest heart in the room was the woman he had laughed at. If this story touched your heart, please don't just watch and scroll away. Like the video, share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness still matters, and subscribe if you want more stories about hope, compassion, and second chances. And before you go, comment, "Kindness is the real wealth," if you believe a person's value can never be measured by the money in their bank account. Because sometimes the screen shows us a balance, but life shows us the truth. And Clara's story proved that the greatest fortune isn't always the money we have. Sometimes it is the difference we make with it.